All right, at this time, we'll call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for September 27th, 2023. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Twait,
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Fikes. Here. Commissioner Glendenning,
Here.
Commissioner Woodard. Here. Vice Chair Halstead is absent, and Commissioner Costin. Commissioner Costin, I see you're still unmuted, or you're muted. Oops. Can you hear us? Commissioner Costin?
I'm here.
Right, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda and consent agenda approval. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda and the agenda? Commissioner Greenberg.
I move to approve the consent agenda and agenda as
All
read.
right, we have a second?
Second.
All right, would the clerk please read the consent agenda into the record?
You have approval of minutes, regular meeting of September 13th, 2023, and new business action approval, transfer of conditional use permits, resolution PZ 12-22, PZ 15-24, and PZ 2023-05 for an assisted living facility on a property described as Tract 36A Killen Estates 2014 replat, located at 701 North Forest Drive in the suburban residential RS zoning district, and that is your consent agenda.
All right, is there any public comments on any of the consent agenda items just read by the clerk? All right, are there any objections to the consent agenda and the agenda? Seeing none, they are approved. Item C, scheduled public comment, we have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak to an item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to E, consideration of plats. We have none, so that takes us to item F, public hearings. F1 is resolution PZ 2023-18, granting a modification to a condition listed in resolution PZ 2023-05 for a conditional use permit to expand the assisted living facility on the property located at 701 North Forest, parcel ID number 043-21030 in the suburban residential zoning district. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Greenberg.
Move to approve PZ 2023-18.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, staff report.
Second.
Thank you, Chair Twait, Commissioners, and member of the public. So before you is Resolution PZ 2023-18. This is a request by the applicant to modify a specific condition that your commission approved back in March for the expansion of an assisted living facility. As you can see on the screen, 701 North Forest Drive is the site, and there are 3 CUPs on this premise, one for each building, and the third being for the expansion connecting buildings 1 and 2, north and south buildings. It is in the zoning districts of SR residential zonings. So ultimately, I really want to just dive into the request, and that's the right-of-way, and just reminding you what you approved back in March, is the easement. We added a condition for the applicant to obtain a minimum of 60-foot right-of-way easement. At that time, it was just staff to ask for what's the norm of 60. While this is not a public right-of-way, so the applicant asking to reduce to 30 we don't have specific codes for it. So 30 is normally the half width of a road. This provides adequate access for fire and for the proposed use. Our fire marshals reviewed this, and the applicant is proposing to then construct a 24-foot drivable approach or road to be accessible for this site and this expansion. In other words, Without this reduction, the applicant would then have to continue to try to obtain a 60-foot right-of-way. They need this with the expansion. It blocks away what they normally would have driven through between the buildings for access. And part of their construction is when they're doing this, they have to build this road before they can do construction because they're losing that primary access between the buildings now. So I just want to be very clear on that. So I've highlighted in red what is proposed in the plan. It's in the packet as well. That's the 20-foot paved road or drive approach that they'll be doing. So ultimately, this is the conditions that was listed in the original resolutions for the expansion, and condition 3 previously stated, and with the underline being the new and in the brackets is being removed, is obtain a minimum 60-foot now, or 30-foot now in width, right-of-way easement on the adjacent property for ingress and egress. That's what the applicant is proposing or requesting for a modification and having your commission consider and grant. As typically with any amendments, we always go back to the criteria for a CUP approval. So most of these criteria is about the use itself. Your commission already approved the original resolution, PZ 2023-05. So with this modification, criteria 1, the use is consistent. The use is not being changed. Criteria 2, about the economic and non-economic value, we're just reducing the width from 60 to 30, which normally 30 is adequate. And criteria 3, proposed use is in harmony with the comp plan. Again, the use is not changing. And criteria 4, services and facilities are adequate. In the second resolution, when they did building 2, we addressed all the service and facilities. And then criteria 5, once again, it's about the use. The use is not changing. So, and 6 is a catch-all when criteria 1 through 4 or 5 cannot be met or needed to be modified. This is where your commission can add any additional or specific conditions to the CUP. Therefore, staff is not recommending adding any additional. So with that being said, staff's recommendation is that your commission approve this resolution, PZ 2023-18, granting the modification to condition 3 in resolution 2023-05 from the 60-foot right-of-way easement to the 30-foot in width right-of-way easement for the expansion of the assistant living facilities. And I've outlined that specific condition with this new resolution. I do want to point out that in the resolution, in section 1, it was not very clear, and that's a mistake on my part. So I am asking one of your commission to make an amendment to be consistent with the language here before you, just to elaborate what condition 3 is, and ultimately it's 60-foot, now being reduced to 30-foot in width. And that concludes staff's presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'll open it up for public testimony. Anyone wishing to testify to PZ 2023-18? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. And let me ask the clerk, I guess, this. So Commissioner Costin cannot vote, but he can participate in the discussion, or not at all?
So pursuant to code, it says a commissioner participating by remote electronic means shall be counted as present for purposes of discussion and voting, except for matters and agenda items appealable to the Board of
Okay,
Adjustment.
so no discussion either then?
Yep.
Okay, all right, and he's aware of that? Or he is now anyway, huh? Okay, we'll bring it back then to the rest of the commission for discussion. Any discussion? Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Twait. So with the proposed amendment that will be presented, then the 30-foot right-of-way will make the access, the process, use of the property fit for purpose. It will be adequate for their needs for construction and will allow for safety, egress, et cetera, to the property. And it's not the primary entry point or exit point. It's secondary. Do I have all that right?
Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Toy, and thank you, Commissioner Glendenning, for that question. Correct. The proposed width, as well as the proposed development of the 24 width, is adequate. I usually, in this process now moving forward, is I always route these to fire marshals or the building official and public works as needed. And all are in agreement that this is adequate for the site and the proposal, as well as this is not the primary access. This is secondary. The primary for even EMS, emergency medical services, will be the front, because that's the shortest and quickest route. This is just as a secondary as needed. And then as well as you saw in the original plans, they have a one-way coming from the south end around the south building to the north coming out for employees and visitors to be able to park if they exceed the amount of parking in the front. But as staff has reviewed, there's adequate parking in the front for visitors and for staff at this time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Fikes?
Is that going to have any impact on drainage or snow removal or anything of that nature with the reduction in size?
Director Mitchell?
Thank you, Chair Twait, and thank you, Commissioner Fikes. We don't anticipate any issues with it. While it's 30, there's a 3-foot gap between, mostly right now with the vacancy of the lot where the easement's being proposed. We don't see that being an issue. And mostly, I want to point out that this is an easement, not a right-of-way, meaning it's not going to be maintained by the city. So the private entity, the applicant, will be responsible for the snow removal. And if it's impeding on anything, then that's their responsibility. But I believe I did put a condition, and I don't typically, to make sure that they maintain these access for EMS at all times, even during winter time and snow, to ensure that there's no issue, because we're not maintaining it.
Thank you, that's what I was getting at. So if there's any improprieties in drainage or any buildup of fluids or anything, it's going to be their responsibility.
Correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Question for Director Mitchell. I think somewhere in your presentation, I thought you said 24 feet once and then 20 feet the second time, or vice versa. But is it 24 feet?
Correct. 24 is what they're going to be developing in terms of the pavement part.
Pavement would be 24 feet, okay. Which is a standard two-way road, or two-way directional traffic, basically, in any street here in town, I believe, so, other than the spur highway and such, so. Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Please call the roll. Oh, to me. Oh.
Commissioner Woodard.
Never mind. Back that up. All right, Commissioner Woodard.
I move to revise Section 1 that reads, that a modification to Condition 3 listed in Resolution PZ 2023-05 to obtain a 60-foot right-of-way easement is reduced to 30-foot in width right-of-way easement is granted for a conditional use permit to expand the assisted living facility on the property described as Track 36A of Killen Estates 2014 replat and located at 701 North Forest Drive.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Glendening seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, just ask for unanimous consent. Somebody?
I request unanimous consent.
Any objections? All right, seeing none, we have the main motion as amended, and I believe we're ready for the vote.
Commissioner Glendening,
Yes?
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes?
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Chair Twait,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, and with any of these type of decisions, a 15-day appeal period is in place. So if anyone is an affected party files a motion for appeal, then that would trigger slowing it down. But if not, after 15 days, you will get your permit, so. Okay, we're going to move on then to item G, unfinished business. We have none. Item H, new business. H1 is transfer of a conditional use permit permits resolutions PZ 12-22 and PZ 15-24. Whoop. Oh, it's on the consent. I was like, why are we doing this thing? All right, we want the next one, the second one. Thank you. Hit me harder, quicker. I need a bigger asterisk on these things, I think. Okay, H2. Recommending to the Kenai City Council on ordinance number 3373-23, amendment of KMC section 14.20.330, standards for commercial marijuana establishments. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Greenberg.
I move to approve, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot the number. PZ 12-22? No.
See, I messed it up for everybody now.
Yeah, I messed it up. Sorry, I was looking at something else. Which one is it?
Read the recommendation again? Oh, I off yours. I gotcha. Okay, yep. So is there a motion to recommend the city council enact ordinance number 3373-23?
Yes.
So moved. All right. Do we have a second?
Oops,
All right.
second.
Director Mitchell, can we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair Toy and Commissioners and member of the public. So this item or code change from the state in regards to walk-up and drive-throughs. We discussed this at the last meeting, and last week at the council meeting, this was referred, the ordinance number 3373-2023, as a new business items to your commission for recommendations on any specific zoning-related considerations in regards to the ordinance. And in your packet, you'll see the memo from our Vice Mayor Baisden here on his motion to prohibit the sales of marijuana and related products through walk-up and drive-through windows. And this is affecting our zoning code when it comes to section 14.20.330, standards for commercial marijuana establishment. So ultimately, this is just asking your commission to make any recommendations on any specific zoning-related considerations with this proposed ordinance to prohibit drive-through and walk-up windows for the sales of marijuana-related products. That's really the summary of it, and happy to answer any questions your commission may have.
All right, thank you. We will open it up for any public testimony, anyone wishing to come up and testify for this item. Seeing none, we will close public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. And Commissioner Costin, you're free to chime in if you'd like. Any discussion? Looks like we have no discussion. Therefore, we'll call the vote.
Commissioner Fikes?
No.
Commissioner Costin?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
Nope. Okay. Let's, oh, yep, hang on.
Can we go back? Thanks.
All right, let's go back for discussion then. Commissioner Greenberg, did you?
I think we had at our last meeting a representative of the industry. Yeah, Ryan Tunseth. And I thought we were of the impression that it was a little early for us to make a decision on this. And what was the decision of council again? Was to prohibit it?
So I will ask Director Mitchell if she wants to tackle that, or is it appropriate for Vice Mayor Baisden to weigh in? Oh, there we go. We got the man with the answer in the back. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. I think it'd be appropriate for our planning director to speak to it if Councilmember Baisden wants to as an advocate for his ordinance, then that would be appropriate as well. Technically, and I hate to do this to you, we've asked our council members to leave the dais when they advocate on behalf of their own legislation.
Thank you. Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So it is council's recommendation to prohibit it, since the state saying that if you want to prohibit it, it is up to the city. There was discussion at the council meeting that ultimately, even if we did a moratorium, which your commission recommended to council, the same amount of time that we would have gone through this ordinance enactment would be the same time we would have gone through to prohibit it anyways. So ultimately, council is recommending prohibiting it. And in your question in regards to Ryan Tunsit mentioning that the state hasn't sorted out or refined or finished this process, it's really the paperwork process that they haven't refined or like completed. It's not the ordinance itself. The ordinance itself of prohibit or allowing it is enacted from the state. Just to be clear about that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So James Basin, no longer your liaison, but now has a council member. I guess that makes it official. So, yeah, the state puts the onus on us to prohibit this now that they've changed the regulations. And we don't have any of these establishments that have drive-ups right now in the city. And I also listened to some of Ryan Tunson's comments, both to this body and also to City Council's body. And my goal is to get in front of it. We do have a couple co-sponsors here too that you see from City Council. Councilmember Winger, Councilmember Dothett, they also agree with the changes. Personally, we just don't, I won't speak for them. For me, I'm going to look at it as a kind of almost dealing with alcoholic establishments. We don't have drive-ups right now. This puts more onus on these establishments that already have security and all the things built in to deal with this. It's not an ADA problem because all these facilities have to have ADA already established for them. So somebody who says they need to drive up and they can't get out of their car would be like any other establishment. You already have ADA requirements, and that's not what this should be about. So small change in it. I don't like that the state basically does put the onus on us, and that's what they've done. This change goes into effect unless we take action now. And this is the action that I'm recommending.
All right. Questions? Commissioner Fikes?
What's the background? I didn't get Tunstall's presentation. Is there a reason that's driving this recommendation? Are you aware of any history?
I think the history of it is during COVID, it was allowed.
Commissioner Woodard?
What I remember Mr. Tunthus saying is that he had just been to a meeting of other sales representatives or whatever, and that the idea of drive-up wasn't even popular with anybody. And I think it's an awful lot of responsibility for that store owner to have to check on all those people.
Yeah, just as you brought up, how are they going to check ID and everything for everybody in the car? Poke your head out, poke your head through the sunroof?
I think that just adds to the difficulty of it, absolutely.
And so what are our city officers or police force, what are their thoughts?
They're not here to testify.
No comments from our?
Haven't had any conversations with them.
Okay.
Commissioner Glendenning?
Yeah, thank you. To be clear and put it in a nutshell, what this would do if you had drive-in windows, it would take the point of sale from within an establishment with established rules, protocols, identification, cameras, et cetera, and put the point of sale inside of a vehicle that may or may not have tinted wheels.
Thank you.
So I think Mr. Baston is spot on, and I agree with him. Thank you.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Have you had any feedback from the local businesses that are in this industry?
None from the local businesses here in the city, besides Mr. Tunthus showing up. And, his comments were that in the conversations, I think broadly, none of them have it right now. And in his view, it would be probably hard for them to make these type of changes anyway. So I don't think it's going to have a negative effect on what's taking place here.
I think some of what Mr. Tunsis had said was that the industry hadn't been represented at that point, and that was why we talked about the moratorium until we hear from them and what their thoughts were on this. I think that was why we voted that way.
All right.
My goal basically is to make this change because the state is forcing us to do it. It has been enacted by the state, and they get to make those changes, and they put the onus on us. Basically, it is okay right now unless we make the change to it.
And when does all this take effect again?
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Commissioner Twait and Commissioner Fikes. So it's effective now, although I don't believe they have like the application forms finalized. So there's just an administrative process that maybe needs a little bit more work on the state's end, but it is legal now. It's just the applications aren't available to be processed yet.
All right, we'll let you come up here again. And I guess then we will,
Yeah.
yep, Commissioner Woodard.
I just want to be clear. If we don't want this to go through, we vote yes or we vote no to turn it down.
We would vote no if we didn't want it to
Okay. Okay.
be
So
done.
Commissioner Twait,
Oh.
if I might, so Councilmember Baisden, Winger, and Dothett are sponsoring an ordinance to prohibit this. So the recommendation right now is that's before you, the motion that was made was to recommend approval of their ordinance, which would not allow it. So a yes vote would recommend, would support their legislation that would not allow it in the city of Kenai. No vote, if you were gonna vote no, I would suggest that you explain why, so that council understands why you want to allow it, or I guess want more time to consider it. I just want to make sure that you understand that your role in this is not necessarily to consider whether marijuana is good for the city or bad for the city, or even necessarily how our police might enforce the state laws, but to look at it from a planning and zoning perspective as to, how it would fit with the planning and zoning functions of this commission. You might consider, whether there's adequate space in the city to have more drive-ups, or whether if you were gonna vote in favor of it, what conditions you might put on it that would improve it from a planning and zoning aspect. But really, it's the council's legislative authority to sort of decide whether, what kind of businesses would be allowed in the city or not. And your function is more, if they were to be allowed, how they might operate from a zoning and planning perspective.
Thank you. Commissioner Fikes.
Thank you for that clarification. I was confused on the verbiage, and so I voted incorrectly. So thank you for that. I will be voting in support of the ordinance prohibiting the rules of a drive-through. So thank you for that clarification.
Very good. And so I'm clear, and make sure I'm clear. So there will be, if none of the other marijuana establishments here in town have weighed in, there is still a public hearing at the council level that they'll have a chance to, correct? Yeah. So, all right. Any other discussion? Commissioner Fikes.
Just want to add that I do agree with some of the topics that were discussed, such as Scott Bloom brought up as far as the zoning and what impact that might have or what that would look like. So if you were to imagine all these locations, whether they were alcohol or marijuana, in their parking areas are now going to be drive-throughs, and so what kind of a safety and traffic consideration is that going to be? So that would be one of the standpoints from the zoning. It might be increased traffic and times a day and that kind of thing. So that would be a consideration I would be thinking of. And then we just don't have that right now with the other items that are regulated. So that might open the door for something down the road as well. So I'm again in favor of supporting the ordinance, and I'm happy to see that they got out in front of this.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Have all the local businesses in this industry been notified that this is happening and that the hearing is there for them to testify at?
Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Twait and Commissioner Greenberg. So when this was first presented to you, I did speak with Mr. Tunsit and asked him to relay this to all his members, that this is what Kenai's doing. So I have been relying on him because he has all the point of contact since he's on the board and fairly well connected with the community here and that establishment. I haven't heard back anything. To be honest with you, with the current existing establishments, I don't really see any of those sites being able to accommodate maybe just Magical Garden because they have the largest lot, but they have such, I mean, I don't think they see a need there. And so I do want to bring that to your attention that our existing sites of established marijuana, they can't really accommodate for this, at least a drive-through with their current site.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Nope. Commissioner Greenberg, you were,
Well, so they do have an opportunity to weigh in at the next council meeting.
correct.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fikes?
Yes.
Commissioner Costin?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Woodard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Glendenning?
Yes?
Chair Twait?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. We will move on now to reports. I-1 is City Council. Vice Mayor Baisden.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Not a whole lot on my report to give you. I think the biggest item at our last meeting was, of course, the council gave the city manager the authority to contract with the Army Corps of Engineers for the Bluff project, and then we had the big send-off with all the dignitaries. So it looks like everything is moving forward, and hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see the bluff stabilized. We did also pass the resolution after you guys worked with the issue dealing with the right-of-way of the issue with Char Circle and North Spruce and with the Boys and Girls Club and all of that, and that seemed like a pretty good way of working with what their needs were, and that passed. And that's all I've got.
Any questions? All right. Item I2, Borough Planning. Commissioner Fikes.
Alrighty, let's see, we had a building setback encroachment permit, and let's see, we had a couple of them actually. So the first one was a building setback permit and encroachment permit in the Sterling area, Lakewood Estates. And that was a request for 4 feet, 7 inches for a portion of a hangar and a well to remain in the 20-foot building setback. That one was ultimately approved with no real conflict, it seemed like. And then the next one was going to be also a building setback encroachment permit. And this one was postponed and asked to be brought back by staff as the applicant and the as-built part of the application was difficult to read. And so as we were trying to request for a setback encroachment permit, it was hard to ascertain the numbers for that setback if you couldn't read them off the as-built. And that was all we had other than kind of a sketch on a napkin. So the request was for a 40-foot garage to be constructed in a 20-foot building setback in the California Beach area. Over in the Marywood Road at the end there, so there's a single-family residence with a double-car garage and 2 large structures in the back, and the lot is long and narrow. And so the folks were asking if they could put any additional single-story garage in the very front corner of that property, and it was going to possibly impinge on that setback. And so a couple suggestions, because it wasn't constructed yet, was why didn't you just add on to the front of the garage that already exists? And they, of course, didn't like that idea because it was going to cost more money. So it was postponed, and it'll be brought back at a later date. And so after that discussion, we moved on to a conditional use permit request to construct a cabin in a 50-foot habitat protection district of the Kenai River. And we heard from the River Center and their input on that, and we heard from the applicant, and all went well, and sounds like it has a well-thought-out constructed plan, and so that one was passed. And then we had an ordinance amending Kenai Peninsula Borough regarding their floodplain management to adopt some required changes so that we can remain compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program. If you remember, a while back, the folks were up campaigning and door knocking and throwing out some thoughts, and so the borough had some conversations, and so some things were raised as to, what can we do better and how can we improve things. And so they were looking at making some adoptions there just to adjust their code so that we can, as we experience more flooding and changes in our area, how can our residents have more opportunity and access to any kind of assistance down the road kind of thing is what it sounded like. So everything sounded reasonable and acceptable, and so that one was passed. And then let's see, then we had a remand hearing for a building setback encroachment. And so that was for a hearing to set a date, and we ultimately, chose to set a date to hear it again. It's back in front of us. And so we had a discussion on whether to open it back up to the public, and so we agreed to open it back up to the public, and we agreed to hear it on October 9th. And that encroachment was in the Sport Lake area, and that was on the GL Holler Street, and so that one was almost a year ago. And there was concern, again, with the construction of the home and then ultimately right up against the road and the adjoining properties and their access to their facilities. There was the garage that was built. So that is back before us again to provide some more input, as there wasn't a whole lot of input to suggest why everybody voted the way they did. So that was my understanding. And so we'll be hearing that one again on the 9th. And we had 3 plats before us that went without review and passed, and then we had one that we reviewed, and that one passed as well. And then we had some director comments. They're finally getting closer and closer to getting an ordinance scrambled for the gravel pit ordinance. And so that's got some things that are getting tossed around with the committee and the borough. And some of the things that they're looking at is, okay, so if we go ahead and approve these things and we go ahead and get them changed, what happens to all those projects that are happening right now? So what does that look like? Are we going to grandfather some in? Are we going to change the set of effect date? So that's one of the big key issues right now, as well as the commission's bylaws for further discussion. Those are going to be coming up in October. So we spent some time talking about some of the gravel stuff that was coming up, and then also some of the bylaws, as there were some folks that were contacted, I guess, via email when we were having some discussion on the encroachments. And so that was a great opportunity to talk about ex parte communication, and if you receive an email, and did you disclose it, and can you have an impartial thought or vote on it or discussion. And so it was kind of a learning opportunity, and it all worked out. That was all we had.
That's a lot.
I know.
Anyone have any questions? Commissioner Glendenning.
Yes, thank you for your thorough report, and a lot of the things that you deal with at the borough level reflects on our considerations also. There's often distinct parallels. But you mentioned something on the plats. There were some plats that were passed administratively, and that
Yes.
works out well. And if we did that here, would that help with the workload? In other words, just something's just so clear and bright that that our planning director can take care of it, and that will perhaps unload her staff a little bit. Do you think that's a good possibility?
Yes, that's a fantastic idea. That's a streamlined process that I've experienced for quite some time now. That's kind of the norm, I guess, is to say that they'll have maybe 5 plats, and then they'll say that 3 were approved administratively, kind of like, do we want to approve the agenda or the consent unanimously, that kind of thing. And like Commissioner Glendening suggested, it's all straightforward in front of us. It's just a matter of administratively hearing it, and so it just, boom, it's automatically approved. And then if there's other ones that require more discussion, a more in-depth review, then that's the ones that we'll present to the commission.
Yeah, so to be clear, you get to see it. You
Absolutely.
just don't go through all.
No, it is
okay.
not rubber, it's not
And-
rubber stamped. It's
And
part
if,
of
and
the
if
packet.
someone wanted to pull it from the consent agenda and bring it to the table, then that
Yes, and
Okay.
that has happened. That absolutely has happened. So,
Sure.
yes, the
Okay.
opportunity goes both ways. Yes, very good.
thank you.
Any other questions for Commissioner Fikes? All right, we'll move on to item 3, Administration. Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So last week, myself, Commissioner Woodard, and our admin, Beth McDonald, we went to Anchorage to the APA Planners Conference, joint with the Western Planner. I thought it was very insightful, being new to Alaska, because things are done differently here. So I got to network with a few. I actually tried to track down the DOT right away so I can figure out what to do about our waterfront and, the development of bridge access and reducing that. So, I got some good feedback and insight. She says because it's an arterial, it's connecting, the spur to KB, it's going to be a challenge to get that reduced in the speed limit. We can work towards traffic calming, but it requires a traffic study and demonstrating that this is the city's plan of it being developed mixed use or commercial when we do the rezone. So that is not as easy as it would sound. So I think I'm going to start trying to dive into that process because I know that's going to be needed as that area gets developed. So I thought that was really helpful insight. It gives me better direction. It was a lot of back-to-back presentation, but it was really helpful. And I hope Commissioner Woodard enjoyed it as much as I did myself. Besides, one of the days they lost power, so we were without power from 3 p.m. till, I think, 11:30. And meaning power means no water because we're on the 13th floor and they need the pumps to push the water up. So it was a interesting day in downtown Anchorage. Besides that, I'm still going through the motion of hiring a second admin for the part-time. Max Best is now back from his hunting trip, so we're going to pick back up on the waterfront and how the rezoning of that's going to look like. And I will put it before you now that our goal is to bring something before P&Z on November 8th, so please put that on your calendar. Max will be out a couple weeks, so that is why he's being pushed out a little bit further. He's going back somewhere, so November 8th is what we're hoping to draft an ordinance, an amendment to code, and bring it forth before your commission. Then next week, I will be out Thursday, really Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, going to another training out in Anchorage. It's a training by the state on warning coordination with the flood happening and in anticipating any future emergency, whether tsunami warning, how to coordinate that from local to state to the community, how to best notify people of such issues. So I'm excited for that because I know with that last tsunami warning, I think we all realized, okay, we probably need to refine some of how we notify the public and bring out the right and correct information. So I'm excited to go to that. Today I met with the borough and a few participating cities that the borough was appropriated the grant funding for the Safe Streets for All. I think the grant was for 1.2 million towards pedestrian safety, kind of a little bit more focus on school areas, whether it's sidewalks, pedestrian crosswalks. So there was matching funds that each city was supposed to do, but I believe the borough is providing that. In return, they're asking for in-kind services, meaning my time or in city's time to make up for the $21,000 that it would have been either we match that fund or we give it back in staff's time to help them with their RFP review. So I'll be documenting my hours, which would include overhead. So hopefully it's not too much of my time to help them develop that plan and work with them on getting their consultant and making sure that representing Kenai in areas that we really could utilize that grant towards improving safety for pedestrians and kids around our neighborhoods. So I wasn't around when I believe council probably approved to support that grant. So I need to go back if you have any memory bank of if we talked about any corridors, any areas of need. I would appreciate any insight. Otherwise, I'm going to just be searching through records, determining if we had brought that forth for staff to look into, because they want bullet points in 2 weeks of areas within City of Kenai where we want to focus this grant money towards. So it's an exciting project, but that just means I have a really short time to catch up to speed what was discussed in the past. So any feedback your commissioner had for me, I'm all ears. Then what else do I have? For the next meeting, I will bring to your attention that there's going to be a rezone of a commercial or abutting a RS zone, and they're wanting to rezone it to RS. I can't remember off the top of my head, so just know that there is going to be a meeting, and it's going to be a rezone. I know you haven't seen it for a while, since probably the last RR to R1, so excited to work on a rezone before your commission. And probably try to draft some ordinance amendments to what I discussed before you last time about reducing the meetings and hopefully getting a draft about abbreviated plats or administratively, because that would save a lot of time for my workload. That's all I really have. Happy to answer any questions your commission may have for staff.
Commissioner Fikes.
On your emergency management for the 2 tsunami warnings, does that include any earthquakes as well, or is that just for flood?
Thank you, Commissioner Fikes. For all emergencies, so it just probably at a state level if state's involved, but I don't know what the course entails. I'm sure it'll help guide local communities to best notify. So yeah, flood, tsunamis, earthquakes, I think those would be included in there. I think they have changed it now to like all hazard to be comprehensive.
And then as far as your input on any of the corridors, I think Lawton kind of runs right past the middle school, the high school. A lot of foot traffic could be captured there for the safety zone. Would be a great focal point, I think, for our city.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Glendenning.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. Excuse me. Regarding this rework for the rezone of the waterfront, we were promised a series of work sessions, were we? So we just don't have legislation in front of us. We get to speak to it twice and then it's taken care of? Do I have this right, or am I overstating it?
Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Twait and Commissioner Glendenning. So I think it's best to present it to your commission first, and then you can say, hey, we should probably have work sessions, and, because, how about we bring forth something and it's not even something that your commission would support. So we want to get your feedback before we do public outreach.
Okay, just to follow, and then we'll have background with that information as presented to us, right? In other words, I hesitate to use the word findings, but the reasons why you thought that way with it? Or you just roll out and here's what we're going to do?
No, just like all things in planning, findings and justifications of why we're moving a certain direction. Because again, before this meeting started, in order for the city to get grants, we really need to justify the direction we're moving. And so I think it's important moving forward with our zoning ordinance that we put the intent justification. So if there's any opportunity for interpretation, intent tells a lot. And it makes my job easier when I'm like, these are the reasons why we're doing what we're doing.
And then one more, you talked about pedestrian safety for roads and whatnot, and there's a grant. And earlier in the meeting, we talked about the transportation corridor between Spur Highway and K Beach going by the waterfront. Do you think would be a good place to apply some money to look at pedestrian transportation? Because if we're going to extend the rezoning across the highway, that will invite pedestrians walking and all of that, and might in itself be a limiting factor for considering going across the highway with the zone, or it might be a safety factor. So that might be something to consider. And if you wordsmith it right, you might get some bucks to help you, huh?
Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Toy. Thank you, Commissioner Glendenning. I thought about that as well. I think the focus is for existing situations to improve the safety of established areas, because ultimately we don't know when the waterfront is going to be developed. And so for us to kind of anticipate something that we don't know with certainty, I don't think we can get support for that for this grant. I think the best way to say is they want to focus on pedestrian safety, and I think the primary focus is around schools and children. So sidewalks, corridors, it's kind of the main focus of this particular grant, but I definitely will be looking at grants to help us, and I might have something on the back end for our waterfront and the transportation corridor bridge access.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we will move on then. Any additional public comments? See nobody online. Looks like we're good. We'll move on. Our next meeting is on October 11th. Are we all going to be here smiling? Commissioner Woodard, you're going to not be here smiling. All right. We'll move on to commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Costin.
Yeah, I seem to have forgotten what 100 degrees is kind of like. So I'm down in southern Arizona right now, and I guess our next travel is going to be towards the East Coast.
Something about Arizona.
He's in southern Arizona, he said, yes. Yeah. Please bring back employees for me. They're all over down there. Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Twait. First, I'd like to introduce in the audience my son, AKA caregiver. I'm not too technologically adept, so I really can't say help. I've fallen and can't get up, so he gave me a bell. So if I fall down, I'll ring a bell for him. So. Okay,
We will have a lot of questions for him, I think.
I'm sure you would. And then secondly, I look forward to the review of the commissions and committees and how we're going to work our business. And I think we can strengthen the communication between and amongst all of us. And I think this will be a good opportunity. And I don't know how you have time, but I know you'll find time, and we'll come up with something. Thank you for doing that. That's all I have.
All right, Commissioner Woodard.
Well, first I'd like to thank the city of Kenai for allowing me to go to that meeting. It was, I thought, quite enjoyable. A little dry, but it was fun. One lecture that you had us in was about roads being a land use or being zoned. And that was food for thought for everyone, was to zone the roads. And in the next one right after that, they were talking about that DOT always contacts the city to find out if there's zoning on certain roads or in certain areas so that they can make their plans based on that. So if it's a residential area, they're not going to put a 4-lane highway through there. And so that was, they were just suggesting to everybody that possibly you think about your roads as a land use and maybe zone them. So that was just one thing that really stuck out with me, but otherwise, I had a very good time, and I will be absent on the 11th. I'm going to be where there's not good reception, so I don't think I'll be patching in.
Very good. And I would say, I don't know if all of us have been to that training at some point in time, but it is very valuable. I think we always come away with good information, so. Commissioner Greenberg.
I don't have anything. I
All
don't have
right.
anything.
Commissioner Fikes.
Just like to say hats off to Commissioner Glendenning. Your dedication is stellar. Love to see you here in your state, and how kind of you to give your thoughts and words and wisdom. It's much appreciated. And kudos to the city for still extending that training opportunity for those of us that wish to attend. So that is huge to see that our city is willing to step up and participate like that. Thanks.
And I have nothing, and I believe since all the business is complete, the meeting is adjourned.